Hello, sports history fans. I'm Harv Aronson from the Total Sports Recall Podcast. You're about to jump into another thrilling sports history moment, but first let's dive into today's sponsor just in time for the holiday season. Introducing Art of Words, the brainchild of word artist Dan Duffy from Philadelphia. Dan meticulously crafts stunning images by handwriting relevant words from some of the greatest sports moments in time. These unique, budget-friendly illustrations are the perfect gift, sparking cherished memories and capturing hearts. Choose from city skylines, sports, history, and musicians to find a piece for everyone. And here's the exciting part. For that sports fanatic in your life, gift them a piece of their favorite team or player's history. Art of Words tells a compelling story. Explore collegiate stadiums, each meticulously crafted with every football victory etched in words. Or venture into baseball stadiums, handwritten with every player from the team's illustrious history. Don't wait. Order a print today for yourself and your loved ones this holiday season. Transform your wall into a gallery of captivating art and surprise your family and friends with a print of their own. Use code SHN15 at artofwords.com for a 15% discount on your order in November and December. Visit Art of Words, where words magically transform into stunning art, evoking cherished memories and touching the hearts of those you care about. Again, use the code SHN15 for a 15% off at artofwords.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time, seasons past, when 22 men traced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score that would bring victory. 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises, and we're live from the Southport, North Carolina home of Gridiron Greats Magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150-plus years of football history and memorabilia. You can find us on the web at GridironGreatsMagazine.com. It is at this time I'd like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Larkin. We have Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show tonight.
Yeah, so happy to be back on, Bob. Love it.
And welcome, happy 2023 New Year. And a whole new year of shows coming up for Gridiron Greats. We're here. So, the playoffs are upon us, Joe.
With a heavy sigh, Bob introduces the playoffs. Yes, indeed.
They, you know, as people know, my favorite team, team I own one share of, succumbed to the deer in the headlight look of Mike McCarthy, in which who's on first or who's on what yard line, what down it is, blah, blah, blah. The Packers
boy, oh boy.
And, you know, half the problem for East Coast people is staying up that late to watch a game. And fortunately now I don't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to work the next morning, so I can sleep a little later.
Yep.
And for the first time, I don't know how long, I almost got up by 8. It was almost 8 o'clock in the morning when I got up, but I never get up, even going to bed late. I never get up that late. And my wife Brenda said straight out, I know they lost. I could just tell by the way you got into bed last night. So I said, it's true.
Yeah.
They blew it. But congratulations
they blew it.
to your team.
Yeah.
Congratulations to your team. The forever young Coach Carroll has been able to produce another playoff winner. Your thoughts?
As I like to say, the Seattle Seahawks have backed into the playoffs. It's always nice when you need a win and you need another team to lose to get into the playoffs, rather than, manifest destiny and being in control of your own playoff, seeds. Yeah, I mean,
right.
both of our teams are not quite our prime. I would say that's a gentle way to say it. Barring a miracle, either one of us going into the playoffs are going to be first-round fodder. Seattle plays the San Francisco 49ers. We've dropped 2 of them to the 49ers. We're playing in San Francisco. I'm not holding my breath. Let's just say.
Right.
Which is why I posed the question the other day on VFC, our football chat room. Would you rather miss the playoffs, or would you rather make the playoffs and be bounced first or second round? I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen wild card teams, win the Super Bowl. The first one that comes to mind are the Raiders, the '83 Raiders, who beat the Seahawks in the AFC Championship, go on and win against the Redskins. But I don't know. Miss the playoffs or first round cannon fodder? What do you think?
Well, I the way I feel about it, a team that's either 500 or one game over 500, especially now in a 17-game season, I really don't have a lot of confidence in that type of team. And looking at the competition, especially in the NFC, you got a pretty good team in the Eagles. You got a pretty good team in the 49ers. You got a pretty good team with the Cowboys. You got a pretty good team. And you got a good team in the Vikings.
Vikings. Yep.
So I can't really see a team, like the Bucs, really doing much in the playoffs.
8-9. 8-9. A sub 500 team making playoffs.
I mean, it's they're in the playoffs, and my gut feeling is they'll be one and done, because I really don't see how they have the depth to run it off. But then again, anything can happen type of thing. It's the same thing with the AFC. Yeah, I mean, in the AFC you got strong teams in the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals. There are strong teams there. So I think it'd be difficult for a really subpar team to do anything. I could be completely wrong, as I've been in the past, but I really don't think the lower seeded teams really have a chance this year as far as the playoffs are concerned. So and again, now we're into 7 teams rather than 6, so it makes it even more, watered down. So whatever.
So you kind of personify that question. Would you have rather the Packers win that game against the Lions and go into the playoffs and face the 49ers, I think? Or are you okay with them getting bounced and not making the playoffs? Which is easier for you?
And this season, I'm okay with them getting bounced, because they've been bounced in enough games all season. I just don't think they had depth on their receiving core Yeah. And I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Rodgers, and I've read about this and I've heard it, discussed. If you're a receiver and Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, and if you overrun your route 2 or 3 yards, the ball is not going to be there. Because you should have stopped, pivoted, and you should have caught the ball that would have been in your hands that the man threw you, rather than, I should have stopped. I don't know I forgot what yard line I'm at, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, I there's plenty of blame to place around for this Packers season. But I kind of blame, in a way, the coaches not specifying, you have a man who's going to put the ball in your hands. So you need to be aware of your surroundings when you're running. And, he can read if you get bumped up and you're running short on your route or whatever, that type of stuff.
Yep.
But the so many passes I saw lost this season, I just think it was the receivers just don't have what it takes, in a way, to play with Rodgers,
Yeah.
So,
well, one other facet of this is the end of the Aaron Rodgers era. He seemed to, with Cobb and the bomb tunnel there, he seemed to be kind of, I don't know, not reminiscing, but just kind of like enjoying the moment or living the moment as he was walking out. Does Rodgers retire? He still has a massive contract left, as was mentioned. Or does he come back for one more year? I mean, can the Pack make another deep playoff run next year?
Well, I don't think they can make a deep playoff run unless the receiving core gets a lot better and the special teams get better again. And I've been asking like numerous times over the past 2 months now, is Rodgers coming back? Half of me says, he's going to come back because he's hungry for one more title. And, 2010 Super Bowl is a long time ago. And number two, half of me saying he's got nothing to play for. And to get frustrated again with another 9-8 season or 8-9 season, what's the point of playing?
He's got 30 million reasons to play. I think it's more than that. What is his final year? I think it's more than that. It's big.
It's to me, the money is always a moot point. I mean, especially I'm sure he's beyond comprehension as far as being set for life as far as his money is concerned. But again, like all football players, you live for that Sunday. You live for that day to run on that field and hear 80,000 people cheering your name. That's a tough way to go out not hearing that anymore. You know what I'm saying? So well, it'll remain to be seen what happens with regards to Rodgers. I have a feeling though, if he does retire, his memorabilia is going to really be pumped on the markets very quickly because he is somewhat of a tough sign. And I know he has, as all newer players have, a couple hundred different rookie cards out there. So it'll be interesting to see which ones really gain traction and gain value in the long run.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens with that.
Always good talking about the Green Bay Packers with you, as chairman of the board of the Green Bay Packers with one share. It's just good to see how the decision-making process, flows.
I'm sorry, Joe, say that again.
It's always good to talk Green Bay Packers, strategy with you as chairman of the board with one share. It's just nice to know how the decision-making process flows.
Well, to me, my decision-making process would be getting everybody together and just saying, are we going to win next year? If not, it's time to rebuild. That's it.
Yeah.
We gotta look forward to the future. Or do we have one more good year with Rodgers and we actually win? And you gotta have better coaching too. That's the way I look at it.
And NFL teams lately in this, day and age aren't really big on legacy. I'm really glad, like my childhood heroes, Steve Largent finished his time at Seattle. It'd be weird to see him lacing it up for somebody else. I mean, it would be an absolute shame if Rodgers got traded to, the Giants for 1 year, that tarnishes a legacy, but I don't know.
I don't.
But again, we saw Johnny Unitas wearing it.
I don't want to see him end up another Brett Favre between the Jets and the Vikings type of thing.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous,
Oh yeah.
So that's
tarnishes an image.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for that to happen right now in any way, shape, or form. And again, you got to remember, Brett Favre turned down a very, very lucrative contract with the Packers to stay as an ambassador to the Packers. And again, I get it. He was hungry to play. He still felt he had a couple more good years in him. He still wanted to win, but he did do pretty well with the Jets, which again, the Jets are the Jets. But then to go to the Vikings, your arch rival, it was beyond comprehension.
Yep. Good point. Yeah. I don't know. It's just you don't want to see. I guess even in this free agency era, we've seen it. I mean, Johnny Unitas wearing a Chargers jersey, Joe Namath in a Rams helmet.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even I guess it's not beyond us for our childhood heroes.
It's doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but we'll see what happens. Our special guest is here, and we're going to move to his introduction and his questions. He has been researching and writing about football history for over 30 years. He's an award-winning author and a sought-after guest on radio shows and podcasts, including ESPN Radio, Fox Sports Radio, and the History Channel. He's also been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, Rolling Stone Magazine, and Deadspin. He has written 2 books, was the managing editor of 2 more books, and a contributor to 2 additional books. He has written hundreds of articles, and currently he's the founder and lead instructor at the Football Learning Academy, an online school dedicated to teaching pro football history. I'd like to welcome to our show tonight Mr. Ken Griffin. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And Ken, I gotta point this out. I know you've been a member of the PFRA, which is the Professional Football Research Association, for many years. And I remember reading some of your articles back when I first joined, and I think I joined in either 1989 or 1990. So I've been a member for quite a while. And I remember Bob Carroll having a few phone conversations with him in the late 80s and early 90s. And he always spoke very, very highly of you and of your talents. And it's amazing to see your career evolve the way it's done all these years, and all the articles and all the books. And I'd like to start off by asking you, can you tell our listeners how you got interested in pro football history?
Well, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so I started digging into the history of the team, and Bills fan. And the farther I went back, the more I became interested in the history of the game, especially the history of the franchise. So I started detailing things like, stats and rosters and game summaries and stuff like that. And I started writing about, the historical aspects of football in Western New York, and things just kind of grew from there into, like I said, hundreds of articles and several books on multiple aspects of pro football history.
So your start was basically with the Bills, and then it evolved from there. That's pretty interesting. That's good. Good to know. The Bills have a very, very interesting history, and I guess our mutual friend Greg Trantner, who is an incredible historian of the Bills. The Bills have an amazing story as far as their history is concerned. So that's a very interesting beginnings of studying pro football history. That's very interesting. Good.
Yeah, and Greg, as he's well aware of a long history of football in Buffalo, not just with the current Bills franchise, but you got the Bills back in the 40s, you had the 1920s teams, you had semi-pro and pro teams prior to that. So Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff in Western New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. An area very rich in football history, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And this is Joe. Thanks for thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's always good when you I originally started following you on Twitter, and it's always fun to see someone who has kind of the same. I like to think outside the box, but when somebody has the same, cadence, an obvious knowledge of football, where somebody chimes in, you're like, whoa, okay, that was above the, go Seahawks kind of route. And I just started kind of following and paying attention. I love your website, and then it's fun to kind of dig a little deeper on someone, like where are they coming from and their knowledge, and that's where I first began to recognize you. And as it turns out, Bob knew you. Tell us a little about where I first started seeing you was the Football Learning Academy. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the classes you offer through that.
Well, as Bob had mentioned in the intro, it's an online school teaching pro football history, and we essentially have two missions there. One is we want people to be able to put today's game into historical context, but also we want to help raise money for retired players in need. So a portion of all the proceeds for all the paid classes goes directly to help those retired players who need assistance. So some of the classes that we have there, the first Black quarterbacks, where we discuss the lineage of early Black players, specifically quarterbacks. We have one on the Akron Pros, discussing the franchise history of the first league champion of the NFL. Obviously, you guys know that it wasn't the NFL at the time, it was the APFA. But then you probably also know award-winning author and historian Jeffrey Miller. He teaches a class there. He's talking about the first big game in NFL history, the Buffalo All-Americans versus the Canton Bulldogs in 1920. Another guy you probably know, another award-winning author and historian, Joe Ziemba, is teaching a class. It's called The Biggest Win in Cardinals History, where he discusses the rivalry between the Cardinals and the Bears. We have lots of others, including interviews, lots of female trailblazers like Amy Trask and Gail Sierens and Shannon Easton. Nolan Harrison comes in there. Ben Troop comes in. We've got a bunch of archival interviews. So it's pretty rich with a lot of different types of things. So hopefully there's going to be something there for everyone to enjoy.
Are those Zoom classes, or how do you hold classes?
It's a recorded video on our site. So basically you can go in either through your web browser, through your phone, tablet, anything like that, and you can go in and watch the classes at your own pace, start and stop whenever you have time. So it's something that'll pick up wherever you left off.
Outstanding.
Yeah, I was just going to ask because I've taught online for about 20 years now, and I've taught different types of class setups. So I was curious to find out how you guys were doing it. So that's a good idea. So you can pick it up at any time, or take an hour at a night to watch it, and then finish it the next night, or whatever the case may be. So it's good. That sounds good. Now,
and you can also go back and watch the classes again as many times as you want to. So.
Oh, cool.
Okay, cool. Good. That's good. Now, are you planning on any other types of classes in the future, interactive classes or anything like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we are doing some discussions about some live Q&A classes with players and other people that have historical context within NFL history. So, yeah, there's definitely going to try to be some live interactive classes with the students themselves. Also, there's more archival interviews. I mean, I've been doing this, like you said, for 30 years, so I've interviewed a ton of people. I want to try to get those recordings on there, so even if the player has passed away, you're still going to be able to hear those firsthand accounts. Plus, lots of other classes. I want to put together some flagship classes as well, talking about the history of the game, in a broader context, similar to what you would have at a college or university. So those are the things that we have planned right now.
That sounds great. Sounds very interesting, and it's definitely needed. We need to continue to keep preserving the word of football history, the actual words of that the players stated, so on and so forth. I think that's so critical to the hobby and to the history of the game at the same time. So that's very, very good.
Totally.
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard. Okay.
You just said I agree.
Okay. Ken, can you tell our audience which books you wrote and what other books you were involved in?
Okay. As a solo author, I wrote Turmoil versus Triumph, which details the history of the Syracuse Athletic Association football team, and they played from 1890 through 1900. Second book I wrote was the original Buffalo Bills on the Buffalo Bison/Bills of the All-America Football Conference. As a managing editor, I did the early history of professional football. That was a bunch of stuff created by the Professional Football Researchers Association. And I was also the co-editor of the All-America Football Conference, which is an encyclopedia of the All-America Football Conference. Then as a contributor, I did a chapter in each of these two books. They're part of the PFRA's Greatest Team series. So the first one was the 1966 Packers, and then the second one was the 1964 Buffalo Bills, which has yet to be published, but should be out, I think, later this year, maybe next year.
Okay.
Great topic. Outstanding. Well,
now
love it.
Ken, I'm interested. Of the two books that you actually authored, did you have one more favorite than the other, or one you were more interested in?
I would probably say the original Buffalo Bills is one that is more personal to me because I was able to interview most of the surviving members of the franchise. So having those interactions and the stories come from them, I actually had one person, Zeke O'Connor. He flew down to my house for the weekend, and we were able to sit down and I think I've got 7 or 8 hours worth of recorded interviews with him. Plus, I was able to sit down and watch old game film of the games that he played in with him sitting next to me and telling me what was going on. I mean, you can't beat stuff like that. So I would say that book is probably the most personal to me.
That's incredible.
That is amazing.
I think I need to write a book on Steve Largent, or Seattle Seahawks, see if I can get Steve Largent to fly out to my house.
Well, there you go.
You're on your webs or on your Twitter account. You're kind of all over the board in the eras that you cover. Like, for example, I love your little brief polls you do. What do you think of when you see this player? Or stuff like that, or who would you rather have? Like if the one you had today was, which player would you pick, Randy Moss or Jerry Rice? And those are two different eras. So you have a lot of modern a lot of modern football people who are like, well, I don't know who Jerry Rice is. I've heard of him. And Randy Moss. I mean, do you have a favorite era? I mean, you're writing books from the teams in the 1890s and the FC era. So I mean, you've got a pretty wide swath there.
Yeah, I would say I like probably both of the eras that you mentioned. The early pro football history, seeing how the game formed and how the NFL formed, but then also going into the World War II era. You look at the All-America Football Conference. You look at there were 6 leagues that were trying to compete against the NFL at that particular time. And only the All-America Football Conference survived from that. So it was interesting digging into those individual leagues, their strategies for going up against the NFL and why they ultimately failed based on those strategies. So I love that era as well. And so I would say those two are probably my biggest interests.
Nice. And touching on that poll you had, Randy Moss or Jerry Rice, do you block people who don't pick Jerry Rice because they're obviously not very smart?
I don't block anybody for that. If they start putting in politics or something like that, then I would consider it. But, everybody's got their own opinion. A lot of people, like you were mentioning before, they may not have seen Jerry Rice, or they may not have with all of the other players that we come up with and coaches, they may not have seen them or know much about them. So there's obviously going to be a recency bias in there. But, people are allowed to express their opinions. And, whether I agree with them or not is irrelevant. It's just a matter of people being able to express who they like, why they like them, and put that out there. So it's fun to watch.
I saw one person say Randy Moss, but the problem is I don't know which Randy Moss I'm going to get. Rookie year, playing alongside Chris Carter, Hall of Famer, who could probably reel him in a little bit, or later on Randy Moss. I liked him at New England. I mean, it was so interesting to see him bounce. Anyways, we could go on a tangent about Randy Moss. We don't want to. One of these days, Ken, I look forward to seeing a poll about something about Steve Largent. We got to work Steve Largent, my favorite team, my favorite receiver, into one of those polls. Maybe we'll take that offline, and I'll help you work on something.
Not a problem. We can do that.
All right. Do you? Buffalo Bills your favorite team. Do you watch modern football? Because it's kind of interesting. A lot of people who study history kind of focus on history and not, don't watch a lot. I know a lot of people collect baseball cards but don't watch baseball.
Yeah, I definitely watch modern football. It's definitely more interesting now that the Bills are doing well. But I always watch Buffalo Bills games. I've got NFL Red Zone, so I watch that every Sunday if the Bills are not broadcast in my area. I love watching modern football, and like I was saying before, I want to be able to take today's game and put it into historical context. So if I'm able to find a way to take something that's happening now and relate it to something in history, that's definitely something I want to do.
Really good point.
The interesting part that I see in those polls also, as Joe said, I'm kind of surprised, but again, I shouldn't be, because being in my 60s now, I've watched football all my life, so I've lived through several different eras of football. You know what I mean? So I do remember players from the 50s and 60s. I do remember players from the 70s, players from the 80s. But I'm kind of surprised with some younger collectors and younger people that follow football. They really don't have a good handle on anything but the past few seasons. I don't know if I'm expressing it correctly, but they just don't have a strong background in the team history itself, whereas my generation, our generation, Joe's generation, you kind of grew up with the team, and then, you stayed and studied the team and learned more about the team. Are you seeing that I'm just curious, are you seeing that with your Twitter account and or with the Learning Academy? People wanting who are younger, trying to, find out more about something, whatever team it may be or player?
You do get some younger people that are interested in that. I think, I am battling against, like the ESPNs and the NFL networks of the world who really don't focus on the history of the game as much as they should. You would think watching them that pro football started with Super Bowl I, if you're lucky to go back that far. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to put out the FLA, in order to make sure that we can teach all that stuff that you're not seeing on all of those networks, stuff that's not being talked about, to try to bolster, the historians that are out there that are putting that information out there, but to try to get it out to a wider audience. So, I definitely see that recency bias, but, I definitely want to try to work against that trend in order to let people know that there is more to football than what started, in Super Bowl I and after that.
Right. NFL had such an opportunity. NFL had such an opportunity in the 100-year anniversary of the NFL to deep dive, do a deep dive, and they swung and missed.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like almost that the history of the NFL starts in 1970 once the AFL was merged into them. And I've said that numerous times. I said, there is a lot of history in the 60 years, 70 years prior to the 1970 merge. And, it needs to be explained. It needs to be understood. And, again, Joe, I'll use you as an example. You're a Seahawks fan. Seahawks came 1976. So they still have a good history behind them. You know what I mean? But then you look at the Jaguars, you look at the Panthers.
Yeah.
You know, they're a relatively young teams. Their fans, and the one thing I've noticed down here in the Carolinas, the Panthers don't really have a strong foothold like I thought they would have in both North and South Carolina. There's still a lot of people down here who are still Redskins fans. There's still Steeler fans. There's still Falcons fans. They're Dolphins fans, so on and so forth. So it's kind of interesting to see. And again, I don't know how many people were Jaguar fans outside of Jacksonville. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to see the differences in the generations, and I see it also, relating it to collecting. I see it in collecting at the same time too. And I know, Joe, you'd see the same thing. But in trying to study the game, if they don't have any idea of where it came from, and if no one is out there teaching it, it becomes tough. And I do agree with you 100%. The ESPN, Fox Sports, so on and so forth, they don't really get into real background, real history. Everything is
history.
Just, the 30-second soundbite, and that's it. And you're not going to pick up a lot, based on that. So that makes your academy even more important. Again, as players get older, as we get older, and as historians get older at the same time. So, but that is something that's always bothered me as far as trying to relate the history of the game. And, yeah, there is a lot more to the NFL than 1970 up. And especially today, there's a lot more to the NFL than 2000 and up at the same time. Ken, I have another question for you. Do you have any interesting research stories that you could share with our audience about any of your books or articles or interviews that you did over the years?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things. One would be for one of the classes that I put together, another from the original Buffalo Bills book. So as far as the record is concerned about the first black quarterbacks, it's not 100% correct. Willie Thrower's name is tossed out there as the first black quarterback since the reintegration of the NFL, and that's not really correct. Kenny Washington got in there. He wasn't halfback, but he got in and relieved Bob Waterfield in 1950 and played quarterback, threw some passes. Then you've also got George Taliaferro, who actually was a starting quarterback for a few games. So nobody's really talking about those guys and making sure that they get the credit that they deserve. It really starts with Willie Thrower and then goes to Marlon Briscoe after that. So that's something that's definitely interesting that I learned in the research for that class. As far as the Buffalo Bills with the All-American Football Conference, looking at everything that they tried to go through in order to try to get into the NFL when the All-American Football Conference folded, there were several questions I really weren't able to get answers to, specifically regarding Bert Bell's actions. He said he was going to put together a schedule with Buffalo on it for the owners to be able to evaluate and be able to vote whether they wanted them in the league based on that schedule. He told Buffalo he was going to put that schedule together, but then never presented it at the owners' meeting. And so when Dan Reeves came up and said, I don't see a schedule, I'm not going to vote yes without seeing a schedule, and so he voted no. And at that time, you needed 100% approval of all of the owners in order to be able to admit a new franchise to the league. So that killed Buffalo's chances right there. And I really wasn't able to find out why he never presented something he said he was going to present. I even talked with his son, Upton Bell, and he didn't know anything about it either as far as why that would have happened. So looking at stuff like that, that's, to me, interesting and something that still is going to try to require research, but chances are you're never going to get the answer to it because Bert's gone and Upton doesn't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure if anybody else is going to be able to answer it because those owners aren't around anymore either.
Wow. That's interesting because that's, again, an unsolved question of history of the game. And do you think he had something against Buffalo, or do you think, I don't know, I could speculate anything,
Yeah, there was a lot of, speculation as far as why Buffalo shouldn't be admitted. They were talking about the weather. But then you've got New York City, you've got Green Bay. I mean, telling me Buffalo's weather is worse than cities like that. And
Good
then,
point.
The biggest thing that they really could say about it is that Buffalo did not have an owner in place. They essentially had a committee that was put together in order to try to get the franchise. The owner that was there, he says, I'm done. I'm retired. I lost too much money. I'm not going to do this anymore. So a public group got together in order to be able to put this franchise in Buffalo. And the NFL came back and said, we need one person that can speak on behalf of everyone. And a group like that, similar to the way Green Bay is set up, we don't want that. I mean, it wasn't codified in the Constitution at that time, but they did it afterwards in order to say that Green Bay is the only team that's grandfathered in to be able to have public ownership of a team. But since Buffalo was trying to do it as public ownership and they really didn't want that anymore, they kind of used that as an excuse as well. But really the schedule is what people pointed to as the reason why Buffalo wasn't admitted, is that no schedule was presented at the owners' meeting when they were voting on admittance.
I love deep dives on topics like that. Just unturned stones. Ken, we had a guest on a couple months ago, Mike Driscoll talking about Jim Thorpe and, Olympics and, how Pop Warner kind of turned his back on Thorpe when the IOC came for his gold medals. And it was such a fascinating deep dive. And this kind of, what you were just talking about just kind of reminds me of topics like that.
It's always great diving deep into these subjects and trying to find out exactly what happened back in those days because, like we were saying before, not everybody is still around. And so, whatever we can do to try to preserve that history and uncover that history is definitely going to be important to make sure that we keep that record going. Yeah.
People who dive deep into that, those little esoteric topics and write books on it, I mean, that is an absolute preservation of history on a topic. I mean, you've interviewed people about, the Buffalo Bills like you're talking about. You've interviewed people who won't be around forever, and to preserve that, I tip my hat to people who do that kind of heavy lifting.
Yeah, and if you want some context, I think from the All-America Football Conference, if I remember correctly, there are only 7 people left who played in that conference.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's
out of hundreds.
Otto Graham just passed away, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a shame.
I mean,
I mentioned earlier, I dig your Twitter account. I dig the topics you pick up, etc. One thing, down the rabbit hole, I ended up on your website, and you have a grading scale on your website for Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, one-way players, etc. You have a phrase on your website talking about the grading scale for Hall of Famers. It's called the Hall of Very Good. And we've used that before amongst us collectors, just kind of poking fun at, slightly below average players, who get in, or not below average, but below Hall of Fame standards. I mean, you've got your Montanas, your Rice, your Walter Paytons, your, et cetera, and then you've got the people no one's heard of. It was kind of interesting. So Hall of Very Good, I like that phrase. And then I looked at who were your highest rated. Al Wistert was an 8.0. Laverne Dilwig, Lavi Dilwig was another one. Who do you feel, based on that criteria, are some people that absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame that are looked over because people aren't looking before 1970 or Super Bowl I?
I would say the 2 names that you just mentioned are at the top of my list. I have Dilwig number 1, Wistert number 2, as far as who I feel belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They grade out on film. You look at, whether you're looking at honors, whether you're looking at championships, whether you're, regardless of what criteria you're using in order to evaluate, these 2 guys have better qualifications than a lot of the people that are being put up now. I mean, you look at the 3 seniors candidates that are up for the Hall of Fame this year. The bar now is set at a single All-Pro nomination.
I know. Yeah.
For a Hall of Famer. Meanwhile, you take someone like Laverne Dilweg. He has 8 All-Pros in his career. He is 6-time consecutive consensus All-Pro and 4-time consecutive unanimous All-Pro.
Yep.
Compared to a single All-Pro. And then Klecko's got 2.
Yep.
And then
all-decade player also. And
all-decade player? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dilweg is an all-decade player. And then, you also look, too, is, Ken Riley. He never led the league in interceptions. He was only in the top 5 once out of 16 years that he played. So he averages 4.3 interceptions a year. And is that a Hall of Famer, or is it somebody that's accumulated a lot of stats because he never got hurt?
Yep.
And then you look at someone like Dilweg. I mean, we don't have complete stats from that era, but of the stats that we do have, he led the league multiple years, not only on offense, but on defense. You have somebody who lines up at a defensive end position and has 27 known interceptions. The only other pre-modern era end that had more was Don Hudson, and he played defensive back. He didn't play defensive end. And he had 30, so he had 3 more. But you look at, Milner, Badgrove, and Hewitt, combined, they still have single digits as far as interceptions.
Wow.
And now you've got somebody else who got 27. So, I mean, you tell me he's not the best end outside of Don Hudson in the pre-modern era.
Agree.
And why is he not in the Hall of Fame when we're focusing on all these recent players with lesser qualifications?
And it's a shame. Wistard passed away about 2 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, it was probably within the last 5 years he passed away.
Ken, so what's your opinion on this? Why are they reaching with these guys? Why are they that fixated on getting somebody into the Hall of Fame, even though they're now basically dumbing down the criteria of the statistics in their play? I mean, I had said this all the time. I can't believe some of the people who are in the Hall of Fame right now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's basically they're putting in people that they covered. So we're getting younger and younger people on the committees, and they're voting in the people that they covered because that's who they saw. Again, the recency bias. They're not digging deep into who truly belongs. You take some of the historians that are out there that are on the seniors committee, get like a Rick Gosselin or something like that. He absolutely is frustrated that they're focusing on these players when there are other people that they should be looking at, but they get tossed aside because they played too long ago. And to me, you're not doing your job as a Hall of Fame selector if you're not focusing on all of history. You're only focusing on what you covered.
One more aspect of that is who's going to put butts in seats? Who's going to show up to, the dinner? Who's going to show up to, to the, induction ceremony? And who's going to come to the Hall of Fame? More modern players means more modern fans. I have it the other way around. I have Al Wistard as my number one, person who's not in. That's been a long overdue, and it stuns me. He made the senior selection twice in the last decade, didn't he? And didn't get it. Didn't he? My memory serves me correct.
He made the Centennial class as far as a finalist is concerned. He was one of the 20 along with Dilweg, but didn't make it beyond the final 20. But he hasn't been a finalist, and Dilweg hasn't been a finalist either, and I don't think they've been at all, but definitely not in recent memory.
Okay, that's what I got. But so a lot of my knowledge of some of these old players comes from, like Wistard's in the 1948 Leaf set. And I love the 48 Leaf set, and I started to dig in to the history of those players where I learned that. So I kind of worked backwards. I loved my Seahawks, and then I started working backwards to get into the roots in the history of football. Do you collect football items? Do you have any, footballs, jerseys, anything like that, football cards?
Yeah, I do have some items. I've collected a few jerseys, a lot of All-American Football Conference items, obviously. Based on our conversation, that's not a surprise. but lots of game programs, media guides, record books, photos, game film. Bought a bunch of items from the Chet Mutrin estate when they put that up for auction. So I was able to get a lot of that kind of stuff. So that are things that I like collecting. But also just 1 second here, going back to Al Wister. When people were talking about Jerry Kramer, they always pointed to his block in the Ice Bowl, and that's, we need to induct him because he had that great block in the Ice Bowl. Take a look at Wister's block in the 48 championship game to Spring Van Buren for that winning touchdown. Tell me that isn't leagues above as far as the quality of the block. You're talking a snowy, icy field. He takes on 2 guys, rotates them around 90 degrees to put a gaping hole that even I could run through, and Van Buren gets the winning touchdown. So tell me that's not a Hall of Fame block if you want to induct somebody based off of a block.
I've never seen that. So.
It's very true, though.
Do you have a video of that?
Again,
you could email to our email group, to the email we had going on to coordinate this. Do you have a clip of that you could send?
I could probably get a clip, but it's probably also on YouTube as well.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. I'll look it up.
All right.
Wasn't sure.
That's true. That is very true. And again, getting back to what I said before, I just don't see a lot of these players being Hall of Fame quality. And you are correct, Ken. They're just putting in people they saw play, and that's it. So at some point, there's going to be such a what's a good word for it? Such a diluted Hall of Fame. It's not even going to be funny. It'd be the Hall of Good.
I've mentioned this before, Bob, but years ago on the football card collecting aspect. If somebody makes the Hall of Famer, their rookie card is worth a lot more. So I was trying to get ahead of the finalists, et cetera. So I started putting together a spreadsheet. This took me months and books. But I started putting together a spreadsheet on existing Hall of Famers, what era they played in, what position they played in. And then I just started putting together their stats, how many All-Pros, how many Pro Bowls, any other special award, like if they're a receiver, how many yards, how many receptions, touchdowns, and then anything else special, like 2 Super Bowl titles, Super Bowl MVP, league MVP, offensive player of the year, et cetera. And then I started taking modern players and backfilling it, and to see if there was anybody who ran into the criteria of that. And as that data starts to get compiled, you really, just like you mentioned, Ken, you really begin to notice the stats getting less and less. Where it used to be like 5, 6 All-Pros got you in, now all of a sudden it's 1 or 2, and you're just kind of like, what? I mean, it's kind of head shaking just on the how low the bar is getting set.
Yeah, if you're not looking at all pros, Pro Bowls, things like that, then you can look at the statistics, and what you want to do is be able to compare them to their contemporaries. So how do they compare to them? Obviously, with rule changes and with more games and stuff, things are exploding, but you can take a look at how they did against their peers in that particular year and say, okay, were you top 5, top 10 in the statistics? If you're not making at least top 5, can you really be considered a Hall of Famer if you're not doing that over an extended period of time?
Yeah, and if you're Drew Brees playing as a quarterback at the same time Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are, being third isn't that bad.
No. Yeah, I mean, like I said, top 5, if you're doing that on a regular basis, and that's going to, fluctuate around, Aaron Rodgers will maybe toss up some yards, or whoever's playing, they'll be able to do that, but still, you're consistently at the very top of the league. When you start saying, you're maybe, the 15th best in the league, for an extended period of time, that's not a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. You've got to be able to show excellence, that you, excelled at what you were doing. And, not every position is going to have statistics like offensive linemen and things like that. So you need different criteria, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for offensive linemen to get in is because there are no statistics. You actually have to watch them play game in and game out in order to evaluate, and you kind of have to know what you're looking at, too. You can't just say, well, this guy gave up a sack, and I was like, well, maybe it wasn't his responsibility. So you really have to know those types of things and really dig deep to look at things like offensive linemen where skill positions, you've got stats to look at, and people just look at stats and say, well, this person has more than this person, so obviously he's better. And it's like, well, that's not really the case because Vinny Testaverde's got more passing yards than Joe Montana. I mean, who's the Hall of Famer?
That's so funny. I was about to mention Boomer and, I mean, Ken Anderson. You've got some guys back then. But, that's a great point. You're absolutely right.
True. Yeah, we're running out of time. Do you have any final thoughts or any other comments you'd like to tell our audience tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I really just want to encourage people to go over to the FLA website, check out the classes that we have, the interviews that we have there. Just go to www.football-learning-academy.com. There's a link on there for all courses, so you can see everything. We also break it apart into different subjects. We also have a blog there, so if you're interested in our blog articles, there's the link right on the front page of the website. So, and I definitely want to hear feedback from people as far as the types of things that they would like to see at the FLA. So absolutely reach out to me, and we can talk about that. And if you're looking for a speaker at your event to talk about football history, also reach out to me on that. I'd be more than happy to give presentations on football history to people.
Ken, I think I speak on behalf of most of our listeners, but we'd like to see more Steve Largent content.
Gotcha.
Noted,
Ken,
Joe. Thank you. Yeah.
Lots of Steve Largent and Al Wister, right?
Check it out your schedule for being on today. I appreciate it. I seem like I've known you for years from the PFRA, reading your stuff and so on and so forth. So I'm glad we got a chance to chat, and I got to talk to you in person, or over the phone at least. So I appreciate everything you do for football history, and I wish you well with the new academy. I'm sure it's going to be a very successful piece.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on and allowing me to talk about the FLA and just football history in general.
No, our pleasure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Ken.
Thank you, sir.
Ken Griffin.
Man, oh man.
His very, very interesting career, lifetime in football research and football history. And like I said, Joe, like I said to Ken, I feel like I've known him all my life. I mean, I've read the guy in PFRA newsletters for years. He was I believe he was the director of PFRA for quite a while. So it was kind of interesting, very interesting. So, all right, we're down to roughly our 2-minute warning and wrap up. But before we get started, I just want to quick note: we have issue 79 is as we speak. Hopefully, we'll be in the mail Friday, so look for it. If you're a subscriber, it'll be coming in the mail over the next few days into next week. And if you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats Magazine, what are you waiting for? Check out our website, GridironGreatsMagazine.com. Joe, 2-minute warning. I'm handing off to you. What'd you pick up on tonight's show?
Great guest. I love having people on who, as we talked about, just grab topics and just wrangle them down. I mean, and topics that deserve deep dives. As last show we talked about why do we like certain players, like they deserve recognition, and some of these topics deserve a light shined on them, and so people who do that heavy lifting and then put that in writing for future generations to be able to enjoy, just I tip my hat. Great guest. Obviously, Ken knows his stuff, and the classes he offers, the stuff he's putting out on Twitter it's great content. He's just great guest, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, I agree with Ken on 2 big points. The NFL could be doing a much better job of preserving their history, and the Hall of Fame to me is a mess right now. I don't care what anybody says. to see people, players who, in my opinion, they're not Hall of Famers. And just because you covered the guy doesn't mean that he should be in, type of thing. And Joe, to what you said, I think it's very true. You know, in a way, Hall of Fame is looking for maximizing their dollar potential. So we need the maximum amount of people we can get to come to Canton to watch the game and watch the ceremonies and spend their money, so on and so forth. And, you know, that's okay, but you know what? It's not working with the players they got. You know what I mean? So that's another big problem that they have there. So very informative tonight. Very interesting, very informative. With the last roughly 40 seconds left, a couple of quick notes. We're going to have a pretty good show next Wednesday night. And I'll leave it at that. We're going to have a dealer coming on who we both know quite well, and he's going to be discussing the 56 Topps football set and vintage cards from 1935 to 1950s and 60s. So it's going to be a good show, and I'm looking forward to that show next week. Joe, final thoughts, 10 seconds.
Outstanding show. Great guest. Thanks for arranging, as always, Captain.
There he was. I'm glad Ken was on. And we're out of time. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with another show. Take care.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.